Hi, my name is Paige Metzger, and today I will be talking to you guys about guardianship. Guardianship. Guardianship is known as a legal mechanism by which the state delegates authority over an individual's person or estate to another party. The term guardianship originates from the state's attempt to preserve its wealth, also known as the parens patriae authority. This authority is applied to those with mental disabilities or children who are declared incompetent and are required assistance by law in decision making and other aspects. The delegated authority is a third party, which is usually a family member or member of the government. Guardianship comes in many forms today. There are separate provisions in different jurisdictions for appointing guardianship of one's person and or estate, with the latter type often being called a conservator or committee. This is not consistent with all jurisdictions, but in addition to this distinction, jurisdictions also distinguish between general or plenary and specific or limited guardianship. Specific or limited guardianship is rarely used, but since the late 1880s, there have been national efforts to make the guardianship process more rigorous and fair to potential wards. When it comes to general or plenary guardianship, that means that they would have total control over the estate, ward's person, or both. And then the specific or limited restricts the powers to particular types of decisions. As mentioned earlier, there have been many reforms of the guardianship process since the late 1980s. This requires courts to consider less restrictive alternatives, also known as advance directives, which we will talk about later. There needs to be a full hearing as soon as possible, and restricting the use of emergency guardianship, and also encouraging the ward to be at that hearing, and assuring that evaluations of capacity assess functioning. Guardianship may be known to be protective of one's autonomy, but is rarely used. The reason that limited guardianship is rarely used could be due to the biases of the judges, the lack of resources needed to keep a guardian limited, and then failure to provide specific information on respondents' limitations, which goes for the experts and the respondents' responsibilities. Or another way of protecting one's autonomy other than using guardianship. And advance directives are described as instructions from a competent individual that directs or authorizes certain actions if the individual becomes unable to make decisions about those things. It allows people with mental illness to appoint a surrogate decision maker as long as they were competent at some point to be able to designate a surrogate. It protects their autonomy and can also include representative pay arrangements. Directives can include supportive decision making, adult protective services, which is usually associated with elder abuse, and the government hasn't done very much to rid of this problem. Another one can include a living will. Scope of guardianship out of the way, now we will be talking about the basis of guardianship. In law terms, or de facto, which means incompetent and in need of a guardian to make decisions for them. De jure, also a law word, means incompetent in law, therefore they are presumed to require a guardian regardless of their mental capacity. Of guardianship, one may go through assessments or be petitioned, and the standards are very vague. Also, anyone can petition your incompetence, and some of it can be based off medical opinion alone. We also have the Uniform Probate Code in place as well. In most states, clinical evaluations are not required, but They might be demanded by the petitioner or subject of the proceeding. The clinician in this instance should be weighing the pros and cons, and they should be focusing on what they are able to perform rather than their diagnosis. And there are more than 70 instruments available today to aid in these assessments. An observation of these people, you want to see if they can do everyday things that normal people would be able to do. This would include the independent activities of daily living, also known as IADLFs. Professionals will come together, test what subjects are able to do for themselves, such as cooking, cleaning, shopping, handling finances, and carrying out medical instructions. One instrument that is often used and very studied is the Direct Assessment of Functional Status, also known as DAFS. This instrument is designed for outpatient testing. It contains over 85 items that address serious functional domains. It requires the individual to perform an activity, and then the clinician will assign the points in each area, coming to the conclusion on if they are able to do these things or are not. This brings us to the question, who should be the guardian? So the guardian that is usually appointed is often a family member or government agencies. With family members, they may be less impersonable, but they're likely to have conflicts of interest when it comes to decisions about money. They may not agree with what their ward wants to spend their money on, which can cause problems. And in government agencies such as social workers, lawyers, and sheriffs, they may be impersonable or overly casual when making these decisions. And they can also be very overworked with lots and lots of clients, or wards, I should say. And the mental health professionals are kind of non existent in this determining who should the guardian be. And they are usually not involved unless obvious conflicts become apparent. This brings us to what should a guardian do? Well, once a guardian is appointed, their actions should portray what is in the best interest of their ward, and they should also be making decisions based on a subjective, substituted judgment. Meaning, what would the ward do if they were competent? What would their decision be? One of the most known conservatorships or guardianship instances would definitely be Britney Spears. I knew when I was a kid, I loved her growing up, but I will not forget when I was 8 years old in 2007 when she shaved her head and everybody went ballistic. She was then put into a psych ward and basically lost all sense of herself. She could make no more decisions for herself, and what was supposed to be known as a temporary conservatorship turned into over a decade-long conservatorship where her father, Jamie Spears, had complete control over her entire life, her money, her medical, just everything, which came to the Free Britney that we know now, where she was finally able to get out of her conservatorship, but you cannot say that she has not had problems since coming out of this. So, based on everything that we've talked about, I would really like to know how we could use advanced directives and improve them today to better protect the autonomy of the ward, such as the instance of Britney Spears. And is the government doing enough, especially for those that are mentally handicapped or disabled and just need a little extra help? Are we doing enough? To the conclusion of my presentation, and I thank you guys for listening, and I hope you learned a little bit more about guardianship. Thank you.